our dear friend and colleague, Rachel Maddow, the host of the Rachel Maddow Show here on MSNBC. So I did some of the, stuff that makes your ears blush in the last hour. But I want to start with you, with what was objected to and what wasn't. Judge Merchan sustained almost all of the defense's objections, but they weren't about the stuff he's in trouble for legally. I mean, this is about this compressed period between Access Hollywood dropping and Election Day. And all that testimony is now on the record unchallenged by Trump's defense team. Why?
Yeah, it's really interesting because the distance between the specific crime that is alleged here and what the prosecution needs to prove in order to establish that beyond a reasonable doubt, the distance between that and what the defense seems upset is being described in court, feels very, I'm assuming they're being driven by their client here, right? And by what's important to him. And I'm not sure that anybody really thinks that Trump didn't do this, right? I'm not sure that in any of Trump's cases that the best defense for him is to say that these things didn't happen. And I know he's denied the sexual encounter itself, but he's also, his defense team said in their opening statements that those really were legal retainer payments for Michael Cohen. And even though Michael Cohen had never been paid that way before, that's of course what Trump thought it was. And of course the sexual encounter never happened. I mean, there's a real world impact of this stuff that I think is quite separate from his innocence or guilt. And I think his lawyers are defending him in terms of the real world impact of this overall story. And I feel like his guilt in front of the jury, as narrowly defined by the charges that have been brought in this case, is kind of a secondary story in terms of its importance to him.
I mean, that is so clarifying. And as I was following this on the Google Doc that lets us track real time, and someone on my team is in the courtroom, and this was the first day that I got twitchy when I couldn't follow along in real time. But you're right. There has been for him no separation of the legal and the political, and it has now bled out to his lawyers. And we should say the notes and the admonitions were about describing his body parts and describing the sexual act. Those aren't at the heart, really, of the falsifying of business records, right? And no disputing that between the drop of Access Hollywood and the hush money being frantic. And I was thinking about the testimony from the banker. Is it Gary Farrow? Some of the driest testimony was bolstered by some of the most explosive testimony when you get into motive and action. And the motive is the political crisis created by Access Hollywood, and the action is this bungled hush money scheme filtered through Michael Cohen.
Right. I mean, we've got the defense will put on their case and we will see what they do. But with all the witnesses that we have seen, including the cross-examination, we've got Hope Hicks who is, no enemy of Donald Trump, saying that, yeah, he expressed to her that it was way better that this all didn't come out until after the election. And we've got his own financial people working out in writing the way that this was going to be essentially covered up in Trump Organization business records, even though what it was a reimbursement to Michael Cohen for paying for this story. I mean, the elements that they need to, again, I'm not a lawyer, but the elements that they need to prove for the relatively straightforward, document-driven story that undergirds these charges, that story has been told, and it's not hanging on any one individual witness, and every witness who is telling a crucial part of it has corroborating documents or other witnesses on their side of the ledger. And so I feel like the defense sort of has to decide, if they're going to try to contest these things. I don't think they've been very effective at contesting the black letter law issues. That are the black letter law matters that are at issue here. And so I think they've decided instead that they're going to try to protect Trump in terms of the real world and political impact of this case. And I don't think that's working either. I mean, Stormy Daniels' testimony today, to have the judge say to Trump's defense lawyers, I was kind of expecting you to object a little bit more than you did. To have the judge, sua sponte, having to object himself because Trump's lawyers weren't objecting on his behalf. I mean, we all know about the pajamas now, right? Like, we all heard the condom-related testimony. All of this stuff is there, and his defense team has let it ring out in the courtroom.
Yeah, I mean, and because you went there, I'll follow you. I mean, the thing with covering Trump for 9 years is you know that when he went on foreign trips, he wouldn't eat because he was germophobic and he's xenophobic. And so I know from my own reporting that when he traveled to India, he wouldn't eat. I mean, his whole thing with COVID and this whole thing with touching, he didn't want to be touched. I mean, his conversation the first time he meets Stormy Daniels when they have sex is about her time in the adult film industry and whether they wear condoms. She talks about being tested. He wants to know how they protect themselves from STDs. It's so on brand. Again, it's her testimony. A jury will decide if it is or is not credible. But to your point about the lawyers doing double duty, serving both as his criminal defense team and his political protectors, all that stuff certainly rings true to the broader narrative we've come to know about Donald Trump.
Yes. And, I mean, listen, there's the very big picture here, Nicole, is, I mean, we're thinking seriously as a country about putting somebody back in the White House who mounted a violent effort to overthrow the government the last time that he was voted out, who says that parts of the Constitution should be terminated, who says he wants to put the U.S. military in American cities. He wants to build camps for tens of millions of people, right? Like, that's what we're thinking about doing. There's like this huge yikes factor when it comes to him. But part of the reason he wants to destroy the rule of law and thinks that parts of the Constitution must be terminated is because in cases like this, where he's facing more than 30 of the more than 80 felonies he's charged with, it just seems plain that the evidence is very, very, very strongly against him. And so on top of the scariness about what he's offering us as a political figure, on top of his likely criminal liability in these multiple criminal trials, we also then just get this yuck factor stuff, right? I mean, he invites her. She's doing a porn company promotion at a golf tournament. His infant son is 4 months old. He has his bodyguard ask her if she'd like to have dinner. So she goes to his room. There is no dinner. He's wearing satin pajamas. She says, get dressed. He tells her, I'll get you onto my reality competition TV show and I will help you cheat at it. Right? He gives her he says, I'll give you advance notice of the challenges on the show and that will help you. He tells her, oh, me and my wife don't sleep in the same room. He asks her when she was last tested for sexually transmitted diseases. He tells her she reminds him of his daughter. She goes to the bathroom. She comes out of the bathroom and he is stripped down to his underpants. And she tries to leave. And he steps between her and the door. And she doesn't want to do it. She says she doesn't feel threatened, but he says to her, I thought you were serious about what you wanted. If you ever want to get out of that trailer park, they have sex. She is not into it. He does not wear a condom. That is particularly concerning to her, and he should know that it is because she has just explained that to him about her work in the adult film industry. They meet several more times. He makes more sexual advances. They never have sex again. And ultimately, it is only when he finally says, no, I'm not putting you on my TV show, that she stops picking up his calls. I mean, that's the character. I mean, Jimmy Carter almost lost in 1976 because he said he'd committed lust in his heart. But this is who we're thinking about putting back in the White House right now, along with what he is threatening to do to the country, in part out of anger for the criminal liability that he has brought on himself by trying to cover up things like this, behavior like this, character like this. I mean, she said today, I have no shame, talking about her career choices. And there's no reason she should. She's got self-determination. She has given herself the career that she wants. But we can have shame. You know, we can have shame about our political choices as a country in terms of who we are elevating as America's face to the world. And today is just, I mean, none of us will ever get this taste out of our mouth.
I think that's right. I also think we made a mistake in covering him as so hapless and accidental. I mean, you didn't, but a lot of us did. He came out of the gate. What was his first thing? What does the publisher of the New York Times go to the White House to talk to him about? Describing all of us as enemies of the people. Why did he need his base to think that and we were disoriented by it, right? We thought, ooh, that will really endanger journalists working abroad, and it does. But it wasn't about that. It was about us. It was about today. It was about making damn sure that when today came around, when the public learned that Stormy Daniels would testify to the sex she had with Donald Trump while his infant son was 4 months old, that his base would say, no way. My guy, he didn't do that. And if he did, man, what do they even say? What a stud. I mean, it's weak and gross. And the satin pajamas, I don't have any clue how that fits in to the image. But it makes him more, I don't want to use the word strategic because that's not it. but his primal desire to survive and thrive, knowing exactly what his life had been up to the moment when he became president, drove everything.
Yes, and so you have to prime your followers for there is no knowable truth, there are no facts, anything that you see is represented as science or expertise or journalism isn't real. You can only believe what I tell you. Right? The facts are what I say the facts are, right? And the right has done this to a certain extent, right, in demonizing journalism for a very long time, right? But he took it to a different level in saying that unless it was praising him, it wasn't real. And that is setting up your followers to follow only you and to accept what you tell them and to do what you tell them. And the courts that he's got to spend time in now because of these multiple criminal and civil cases are places where there are no alternative facts, where there are only facts, and that it's an adversarial process, and he's got good lawyers who are representing him vigorously. But the evidence is tested, and it's subject to law and the judgment of trained jurists. And there isn't any way around it other than getting your followers to tune it out and to tell them that this is persecution and that nothing happens in that courtroom is real law. And in order to make that case to the public, you need to make the case that the judicial system in America is bunk and is rigged and is just designed to persecute Donald Trump and his followers, and it therefore must be dismantled. The authoritarian project and the anti-rule of law project are the same project. And you can see on days like today, more clearly than any other times, why that is.
Well,
the world knows Donald Trump's history with Daniels is what catapulted the payments that led to this trial. One question for the jury today is simply who is telling the truth about that encounter. Daniels finally speaking out as Trump looked on today. We have those sketches and many reporters inside the room who viewed him as having a sour expression. Today's testimony grew heated at times, with the judge getting angry and Stormy Daniels raising her voice to the degree that it was described as yelling, or almost yelling. Now, Daniels testified she didn't care about the money per se, but she wanted to get that payment deal done. If that is familiar, it is a view she shared many years back when the story broke in 2018.
Was it hush money to stay silent?
Yes. The story was coming out again. I was concerned for my family and their safety.
I think some people watching this are going to doubt that you entered into this negotiation because you fear for your safety. They're going to think that you saw an opportunity.
I think the fact that I didn't even negotiate, I just quickly said yes to this very, strict contract, and what most people will agree with me, extremely low number, is all the proof I need.
That is how Daniels put it then. And there is this balance in the money side that was on display today, because on the one hand, she popped back up with her lawyer and took the money. On the other hand, and took the money for silence. On the other hand, there is the kind of view or feeling that there was a lot of other dirty work going on, both during the rushed October payment, but also afterward. And again, this is a business fraud and campaign case, so the after period could matter a lot. And Daniels says Trump benefited from the 2016 deal and that she understood his lawyer, Michael Cohen, to be acting on his behalf. Now, her view does not settle the matter. Other witnesses could be called and insist Trump was out of the loop. That's what his lawyers have tried to say. But again, the jury is hearing her view as the key participant, and they are hearing a lot more people and a lot more evidence suggesting that Trump was involved in this and that it all just was sort of cooked up without him. Daniels recounts the last time she saw Trump was in 2007, and he seemed blasé then about keeping their history secret. This exchange matters again because it builds on the story that the DA's team has been telling, that it was only the election year, 2016, that made Trump suddenly change his approach. He didn't appear to be concerned about people finding out then, Daniels says under oath today. Now, she was very explicit on the stand, and that included at times clearly offering more than that was asked. And remember, this is not just some random conversation or dinner party chatter. This is a very narrow proceeding. I've told you how in some other days of the court they've had People from C-SPAN come in because they couldn't get to an agreement about what to be stipulated. And witnesses are supposed to respond to questions, not just give speeches. And this was the most potentially sensitive witness we're going to hear in the whole trial. So at one point, for example, Daniels was detailing the feelings she had, her hands shaking, she just wanted to leave. And while that may be her honest view, I'm not saying it's not true. I am saying that the judge at times thought she was going farther than what was right for the evidentiary testimony that they'd agreed upon. Now, as a matter of fairness, remember, the case is about business fraud in the campaign. It is not about adjudicating the encounter itself. Now, I would remind you, Trump's lawyers have been chided on other days for what they and their client has said or done. But today, we saw something a little different. The judge, quote, angry with prosecutors. That's from one of our write-ups of our people watching over Daniels' testimony and directing prosecutors to avoid what was clearly, quote, unnecessary detail, because we know the judge's view was some of that would have no legal point and could even be prejudicial. The judge siding with Trump's lawyers on that point, sustaining multiple objections by the Trump defense. And they were hammering prosecutors, arguing that they said the only reason the government's asking some of these very personal questions, aside from pure embarrassment, is to, quote, inflame this jury. Now, the judge clearly understood that concern and tried to narrow prosecutors or sustain the objections, which, again, means that you don't just keep going down that road of questioning. The judge also rejected a bigger reach by the Trump lawyers when they requested that they basically toss or stop the whole case with a mistrial motion. Now, there were things that would have been better left unsaid. The judge agreed in part with the logic there and said Daniels was a little difficult to control, but that didn't get to the point, quote, where a mistrial would be warranted. Now, prosecutors did try to talk to Daniels about keeping her answers focused or short. There was also a tense cross-exam from the Trump attorney who asked, am I correct, you hate President Trump? To which she said yes, and you want him to go to jail. Daniels replying, I want him to be held accountable. The idea there is to do something that we're going to see with both Daniels and other witnesses like Michael Cohen, which is to paint them as somehow so vindictive, so angry that they are less than truthful. Remember, we talk about free speech and First Amendment and your right to your views and opinions. These witnesses can have views of Trump, just like they could vote for or against him. But in the court of law, they are not supposed to let those views infect or distort their actual under oath testimony about facts, about what did or didn't happen. And so the Trump lawyers may have been onto something here. We're going to talk about that with our guests tonight, about whether that could affect the jury at all, how credible they see even a very key witness like Stormy Daniels. They also asked about a goal of, quote, extorting Trump. So that's a way to kind of push that defense, but Daniels resisted that. You can see the exchange here. You were looking to extort money from President Trump, right? Asked the lawyer. Stormy Daniels, false. Trump lawyers continues, well, that's what you did, right? False, Daniels says. This is one of the most explosive and emotional days we've seen in this trial yet. And it is clearly on the line. And when I say on the line, I don't mean in some sort of made-up observation. I mean under the rules of the court. And the reason the judge had to actually limit some of the testimony is that it was at, on, or sometimes over the line of how much of this was just stuff that sounds bad about Trump, and it might be true and sound bad, but that's not enough to convict, and what was necessary to show, according to the DA, that they have a truthful witness who had this encounter and was paid off for it, and there was a cover-up, and it was a campaign crime.
Since the start of this trial, Donald Trump has violated his gag order 10 times. Just this week on Monday, Trump was fined another $1,000 for doing a phone interview where he said the jury was picked so fast from a pool of 95% Democrats. Now, the judge gave him a stern warning, saying, quote, it appears the $1,000 fines are not serving as a deterrent, which, yes, obviously, Judge. The last thing I want to do is put you in jail. You are the former president of the United States. Also true. Possibly the next president as well. But he warned Trump that his continued willful violations of this court's orders threaten the administration of justice, constitute a direct attack on the rule of law. I cannot allow that to continue. It appears the judge was right. It is not serving as a deterrent because just early this morning, Trump posted this, quote, I have just recently been told who the witness is today. apparently references Stormy Daniels. This is unprecedented. No time for lawyers to prepare. No judge has ever run a trial in such a biased and partisan way. I should tell you the post was quickly deleted from his account. Back with me at the table, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin, former federal prosecutor Harry Litman. I should say that post, again, on the line, not a direct violation, but it is about a witness, which gets into territory. So I want to read this part. Do I have this? Do I have it? Oh, here it is. Sorry. This is the sidebar between Mershon and Todd Blanche at some point that happens. And you guys don't hear this, right?
Right.
Okay, so we're getting this later. I understand your client is upset at this point, Judge Mershon, but he is cursing. But he is cursing audibly, and he is shaking his head visually, and that's contemptuous. It has the potential to intimidate the witness, and the jury can see that. Mr. Blanche, I will talk to him. The court. So I'm speaking to you here at the bench because I don't want to embarrass him. Mr. Blanche, I will talk to him. The court, you need to speak to him. I won't tolerate that. Mr. Blanche, I will talk to him. That's pretty wild behavior from the defendant.
And yet I've seen this movie before, Chris. This is my 4th Trump trial in 12 months. And I've seen this before. I saw it at the E. Jean Carroll trial. I saw it at the civil fraud trial. Remember, Trump did not attend the first of the E. Jean Carroll trials.
Correct.
And I'll venture a guess that it went better for him for not having been there,
Yep.
not just because he didn't testify, but because he does stuff like this. At the second E. Jean Carroll trial, he banged his hands on the table, looked at the jury when she was testifying and said, never happened, audibly, right?
You just cannot, I mean, just to be clear, take a step back, like, absolutely prohibit, you can't do that.
The judge called it what it is, contemptuous.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally contemptuous.
And he's also said before that he would not find a violation of the gag order sua sponte, meaning on his own without a motion.
Right.
Obviously, what the client does in court is also not extrajudicial, as he pointed out the other day. But I think he is dead serious when he talks to Blanche, which is why you hear this repeated incantation of, I will talk to him. I will talk to him. I don't think we saw any of that for the remainder of the day, but I think Trump is dancing on the head of a pin. The problem is the DA's office also knows that, and they know that Mershon is prepared to send Trump to jail for as little or as much time, up to 30 days, as possible. And so if they come forward with another alleged violation, they know it has to be a serious one that is worthy of the punishment that Judge Mershon has stated he's willing to impose.
But the big detail I think you elided is he deleted it after half an hour. He's nervous.
No, right, yes, no, we said that.
Right.
But
Yeah.
my point being that, right, so there is something that's happening
Yeah.
here. Now, let me just ask the mistrial question, and then I want to get your sense of the sort of the day of Stormy Daniels and how she did, because we haven't talked about Cross yet. So just quickly on the mistrial motion, he says, as a threshold matter, Mr. Blanche, I agree, there were things that would have been better left unsaid. You said he was quite pointed on that, Harry. In fact, sustained his own objection. I think the witness was a little difficult to control, but ultimately, I'm not going to give a mistrial. Is that about what you would anticipate?
At most. I mean, look, it really wasn't something that could prejudice the entire proceedings, et cetera. But he had laid down these guardrails, and that was exactly where they kept in the questioning. But it was really Stormy herself who really did go outside the answers quite a bit. So I don't think he was really flirting with the mistrial, but he wanted to,
yes.
and he told the DA to take her back and caution her, shorten her answers, and she did.
I was thinking of Catherine Christian, our frequent guest here, who worked in that office in that court for 25 years, who's like, people like to cross. There's a lot of line crossing, and it's sort of, you're kind of getting as much. It's like in the playoffs, the NBA, like you're going to sort of push until you get the whistle, right? Like that's kind of the intent. So I want to get your sense. The cross seemed to me not that effective as I read it, but I was not in the room. Did you think it was effective, Lisa?
I thought there were moments in time where there were inconsistencies in her story, and she appeared to tie herself a little bit up into knots. But on the whole, the tone that the defense took with her, which was combative from the start.
And this is Susan Neckles, who
This is
hasn't
Susan
done
Neckles.
a ton of witnesses in this trial.
She hasn't, and my suspicion is because she was saving herself for the two big ones today, and I expect that she'll be the one to cross-examine Michael Cohen. Susan Neckles was incredibly well prepared. She knew that book that Stormy Daniels has written inside and out, and yet it didn't quite pay off for her because she was combative with Stormy, and the tone was nasty to a point that I think the jury will ultimately find empathy. Also, Stormy did get much more succinct in her answers and almost was more emboldened by getting to answer leading questions, right? The fact that she can say false and just stop right there.
There was a few like weird kind of Perry Mason moments.
I mean, really, textbook mistakes, I got to say, on Nichols' part. You want a cross to be crisp and have the witness answer every question. Yes, correct, correct. And when you get to the point where you've implied you're lying, that's when you stop and go to the next topic.
Right.
She went for broke repeatedly.
Like, you've made it all up,
haven't you? False. Right. And then she was stuck, and there were repeated sidebars also. So her rhythm is everything on cross, and her rhythm was repeatedly broken.
It's so funny when you're in a deposition and they're asking you these questions, and you know you're saying yes succinctly because you're like, where's it going? Where's it going? Or you know that like yes. Okay, I know you got an idea here, right? How do you? What was your evaluation of her overall sort of credibility today in terms of what this witness meant for the case?
I thought it was strong because substantially the core of the story was sympathetic, and she substantiated everything. But I found myself not certain. I thought there were different members of the jury who reacted to her differently. She was an unusual kind of witness, much more colorful, much more vivid and dramatic. So I thought overall fine. But I wouldn't be surprised if some among the jury were, you know, a little bit nonplussed, and I don't know how it'll go back there. Remember, she's a witness. Doesn't matter for the law. She matters for the feeling of the case, the righteousness of the case. Even if she were making it all up, it wouldn't matter for the charges, and yet it would be devastating for the case. We want them to like her, and I think they largely did. I wondered, though, how you felt. I was uncertain.
I think Stormy Daniels, as Carrie said at the very beginning, is a sort of a complicated person, and she's a very conversational person who had her own objectives in being a witness. Again, I go back to the fact that for her, this was a traumatic event. She wanted to tell her truth, and her lived experience and how it fits into this case are not one and the same. And that posed problems for the prosecution in the sense that Susan Hoffinger, who took her direct examination, is an extremely experienced prosecutor. She's not a person that would just lead a witness casually or erroneously. And yet there were times where I felt like she was boxed in. She didn't have any choice but to ask leading questions to prevent Stormy Daniels from going on and on about things that Mershon had already warned were irrelevant or prejudicial or both.
It's really interesting stuff.
What she said.
We're going to come back on Thursday, and we'll see. I mean, there'll probably be redirect, we imagine.
Sure.
And wow, what a day. Well, that was, honestly, I cannot thank you both enough. That was fantastic. You guys are putting in incredible work.
Thank you.
It was great. I feel like this is what I didn't even need to be there. No. I got exactly what I needed. Lisa Rubin, Harry Litman. Thank you both.
Rachel, let me just first go to you in terms of what we heard today. Some of it we knew before. Some of it was new. We are 2 months out from the Republican nomination where Donald Trump is expected to be officially named the Republican nominee for president.
Yeah, and now you've given me that nice, pretty word picture with the boxer shorts. Just saying that right at the end. That was a real kindness.
Sorry.
Thanks.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm not as sorry as I am.
Rachel was hoping to do something more exalted with her life than talk about Donald Trump.
Weren't we all? Weren't we all? But here we are. Here we all are.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Here we all are. Yes, here we are. I mean, like Jimmy Carter, lust in his heart, almost lost the 1976 election. Gary Hart, lady sitting on his lap, like, that's it, you're gone from politics forever. But in this case, we get the sateen pajamas and the boxer shorts and the not wearing the condom and the spank me with the magazine. And we're just going to move on and have it be like a quasi-religious exaltation of Donald Trump as the great evangelical and right-wing family values hero for the Republican Party in a few months. It's just, this is where we are. I will say, though, Alex, that I'm glad you sort of, before the boxer shorts distraction, which is very upsetting, you landed on something there that was very important, which is they elucidated today from Stormy Daniels, and this is not something that I knew before hearing her or for reading about her testimony today, that there was no sign from Trump, no indication, no gesture from Trump at all that she should keep this tryst with him, this encounter with him secret at all. Ever, under any circumstances, not about embarrassing his family, not about embarrassing him personally, not about it being false, allegedly false. None of these things. There was never a claim from him that she should be quiet about this until the election. And that is important in terms of proving the criminal allegations here. And it dovetails very neatly with the other testimony that we got, that indeed the other hush money payments that were arranged through the National Enquirer, the people who were the subject of those hush money payments, they were released from those agreements once the election was over. In both of those cases, what this means is that this hush money system between Trump and Michael Cohen and the National Enquirer and all these folks, it was specifically designed to influence the election. And when you combine that testimony with the false business records evidence that we've got that the defense isn't even contesting, that's kind of both the elements of the crime that you need.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why we wanted to highlight it, because of course we're talking about the salacious details. It's impossible not to. They're meaningful in terms of the narrative of this case, Lawrence. But there is the anecdote that Donald Trump's parading Stormy Daniels around Trump Tower. There's not an attempt to hide his, I'm not going to call her a mistress because it kind of sounded like a one-off, but there was no shame in that game, as it were. You were in the courtroom today for this. Can you tell me how the testimony felt in the room?
Rachel's been in the room. I find it an extremely difficult courtroom to describe because it is so intense. And I say what's difficult about that is I've been in courtrooms where it's a murder trial. I've been in courtrooms where much, much, much worse alleged crimes, mafia conspiracy murder trials, and they're tense. But they're not like this. This is this other planet of jurisprudence in which you have this former president on trial. And just to get to the analysis, I think the best review of Stormy Daniels' testimony today was from Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer, Todd Blanche. In the argument he made for a mistrial, he presented her testimony in the morning session as so damning to Donald Trump that they can't possibly recover. They can't possibly win the case. That's how effective he thinks her testimony was. And he was fighting for that mistrial like he was fighting for his life, like he was fighting for Donald Trump's life in that courtroom. And the Stormy Daniels testimony I saw was a calm and steady presentation, consistent with what we'd heard before in so many of those television interviews. I had no intention of getting into the details of what
you don't
happened.
have to. I did it for you.
And by the way, that was the incident. That was what the mistrial was about, was that the judge wanted to eliminate as many details as possible from what actually happened in the bedroom. And more of those details got in, not because of the DA's questions, really, but because of the expansiveness of Stormy Daniels' answers, which is something that is not really possible, easily controlled in the courtroom. There were objections. The judge sustained pretty much all of the defense's objections to the testimony. The judge said he's going to issue a limiting instruction to the jury about how to use her testimony when they're evaluating the case.
I do want to talk about the mistrial piece of it, Rachel, because this seems of a piece with the walking right up to the line of getting Judge Marchant to sentence him to some sort of jail time for violations of his gag order. It feels like Trump and his defense team are trying to build this sort of pressure cooker in and around this trial and dare the judge to have to cross a line or to be able to wave the specter of a mistrial to his supporters and say, see, this is a kangaroo court. The justice system is rigged against me. And, you know, for people who read the transcripts and understand what transpired in court today, I don't think that holds water. But to Trump supporters who want to believe in the injustice and the grievance that Donald Trump has stoked for 8 years now, is it effective?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point strategically, Alex, because we did have Judge Marchand considering that mistrial motion from the defense, and he said to them, I was expecting you guys to be objecting a lot more than you were. If you were really objecting to what she had to say there, you could have piped up more. You sort of have yourselves to blame here, which raises the prospect that they were letting her say things. They were not objecting. They were not drawing attention to it in the hopes that she might speak in such a way that might raise the prospect of a mistrial. Now Judge Marchand, in addition to questioning their strategy and the fact that they hadn't raised objections themselves, he also said, no, you're not getting the mistrial. I don't think that it's warranted at this point, that part of the transcript that you described there at the top of the show, Alex. But, if there is, Donald Trump has the same rights as any defendant, and defendants have lots of rights. And that motion for a mistrial was not granted by the judge. They can appeal that. And if they think there really were grounds for a mistrial, there really was something fundamentally that went wrong in the trial, they can appeal his ruling. I doubt they'll get anywhere with it, but it would certainly be an additional delay tactic, and they'd love that. So this, the reason this is a site of accountability for Donald Trump like no other is that there are rules in court and you can't bluster your way out of them. And that applies to this salacious testimony and all of its detail and the seemingly somewhat confected furore about it.
Yeah. Speaking of confected fury, we got some. We got the transcript before Showtime, which is a bonus, and there are some details about the sidebars that were happening, Lawrence.
They're great. Yeah. The sidebars are great.
I feel like you could appreciate this having been in the room, but I'll read one between Judge Marchand and Trump's defense attorney Todd Blanche. This is Marchand to Trump's team. I understand that your client is upset at this point, but he is cursing audibly, and he is shaking his head visually, and that's contemptuous. It has the potential to intimidate the witness, and the jury can see that. Blanche, I'll talk to him. Marchand, one time I noticed when Ms. Daniels was testifying about rolling up the magazine to spank him and presumably smacking your client, and after... the front runner. And after that point, he shook his head and looked down. And later, I think he was looking at you, Mr. Blanche. Later, when we were talking about The Apprentice, at that point, he uttered a vulgarity and looked at you this time. Please talk to him at the break. Blanche, yes, I will. Reminds me of when someone's like, your kid's misbehaving in class. Can you do something about it? And I'm like, yeah, I can, knowing full well there's nothing I can actually do.
Yeah, that's the judge saying, I watched him in contempt of court in his seat. In the defendant's seat in this courtroom, and he said he's not going to hold him in contempt, but he said that is contemptuous behavior. And we, as you say, just discovered that in the transcript. We read it about an hour ago. But we we're always watching those bench conferences and always wondering what's going on. And so that's one of the big suspenses of the transcripts coming out. But, every time I walk into that courtroom, every single time, I always think, I'm walking into why I thought Donald Trump would never run for president. Because he was living this life. And I knew he was living this life, and New Yorkers knew he was living this life. He was at a golf tournament where one of the holes in the golf tournament was sponsored by Wicked Pictures, the leading porn producer in America at the time.
Yes.
That's the golf tournament he wants to be in. No other future presidential candidate was there. No presidential candidate has ever gone to a golf tournament where there were, porn stars there at one of the holes. And Stormy Daniels describes that encounter. She met him at the hole that Wicked was sponsoring.
Yes.
That's where they met. And so think about the dozens upon dozens upon dozens of golfers who passed through that hole, greeted Stormy Daniels, got some water from her, and that was the end of it. They are all still free to run for president without having a big scandal in their lives because of what they did that day at the golf course.
I will say... just to put a finer point on it, and I'm sorry, again, to anybody who doesn't want to hear this, the man invites the adult film star to his room and within a matter of minutes allows her to spank him with a magazine that he's on the cover of. That's the beginning of the conversation. That's where we're at. That's the front runner for the Republican nomination.
Can I just say again, I feel a little bit like I'm on safari in this culture. I don't know. What do I know? You guys know
we
me.
all are.
Also, sending the bodyguard, do you want to go to dinner with Mr. Trump? And she shows up and she's like, where's dinner? Also, put on some clothes.
Yeah.
I mean, I am a stranger in your land. I don't know if this is a normal thing that happens when you meet.
No. In what land? No land.
No, Rachel, first dates normally do not take place in the hotel room.
No.
There's usually a restaurant
You don't
involved.
start in the pajamas. You don't start by dropping your pants and letting someone spank you with the magazine that you're on the cover of. Just putting it out there. Not normal.
So at President Trump's trial, they were talking about how he might end up in jail if he continues to violate these court orders. Is Rikers prepared for that? Do you guys have those discussions yet? And if so, what would that even look like?
Our amazing commissioner, she is prepared for whatever comes on Rikers Island, and I'm pretty sure she would be prepared to manage and deal with the situation. As you see what's happening with Harvey Weinstein. We have to adjust, in this business, particularly around law enforcement, we have to adjust whatever comes our way, but, we don't want to deal with a hypothetical. But they're professionals. They'll be ready.
Andrew Weissman, they're thinking about it.
Yeah, well, that actually is the right response, which is, many people say because the former president has Secret Service protection.
I'm one of those people.
Thus, he can't go to jail. That has it exactly, with all due respect, has it exactly backwards. The Secret Service is going to do and has to do what the judge orders. And as I've said, it's easier to keep them protected in a jail cell, not harder. Their job is to make sure that the people they protect are, it's not some nut job who's taking a crack at them. And, that's a difficult job that the Secret Service has for everyone. But this will be a challenge, but not any more than, for instance, Barack Obama and Michelle Obama faced, when they took office, where it was off the charts what the Secret Service had to do. So, if the judge makes that call, then the job of the NYPD and the Marshal Service and the Secret Service is to carry that out. It's not to be, for the judge to be subservient to them. That really is not how our system works in a rule of law country.
Yeah, Lisa, my point about it has been practical. That judges are going to be very reluctant because of the practical considerations of the Secret Service. And we heard that when Judge Merchan was giving his long statement about how reluctant he is to use jail because of what it might mean to the Secret Service and the guards. But he didn't say, I won't. In fact, he kind of said, I will, but I'm very reluctant.
I will, and I'm very reluctant. And I have to say that has to shape how the DA is thinking about this now, too, because knowing that he's sort of thrown down the gauntlet and said, I will, even though I don't want to, that puts the onus on them to make sure that whatever the next alleged violation is that they present him with, it better be a really serious one that the public understands as commensurate with some incarceral penalty, because for example, the thing he said this morning about being upset about the witness that was called and they didn't have enough time to prepare and then quickly taking down, that wouldn't have passed muster. So I think it's changing everybody's behavior, certainly changing the lawyer's behavior on the Trump side, right? Because somebody had to have gotten through to him to say, that's not kosher, you better take that down. But it also is changing incentive structures on the DA's side to really monitor themselves for the seriousness of any alleged violation, knowing what will happen if the judge agrees with them.